It had been for them, celebrating the moment I was no longer needed. They were all clapping for me, but something about it felt off. Craig stood at the center of the room, tie loosened, eyes glinting as he raised a glass of champagne. "To Helena," he declared. "The woman who just opened the door to our biggest opportunity yet. $18 million. Folks, one hell of a deal." The team erupted in cheers. Someone whistled. I smiled politely, nodding at the faces I'd worked beside for nearly a decade. But inside, I was already trying to decode Craig's smile. That man never praised without purpose. We were standing in the company's main conference room at Rydell Innovations, surrounded by half-eaten cupcakes and a cheap balloon arch that read, "Congrats!" A rushed effort thrown together in my honor. Or so they said. I'd spent 14 months courting Greenwell Logistics, running simulations, drafting infrastructure plans, pitching revisions at midnight after their team had one more concern. I'd rewritten their tech blueprint from scratch, even patched an early flaw that could have collapsed the system. The win was personal. I didn't need confetti. I just wanted the work to be seen. Craig leaned closer during the toast, voice low enough for only me to hear. "There's a raise coming," he said. "Big one, don't worry. We take care of our stars." His hand tapped my shoulder twice before he turned away. It should have felt like a victory. I should have gone home proud. Instead, I lingered as people filed out. Something gnawed at me. I opened my laptop, intending to finish one last client Q&A instead. An internal email caught my eye. Subject line: "Final draft, Greenwell Systems proposal." Sent 30 minutes before the toast. Curious. I clicked. There it was. My entire technical strategy, complete with annotated footnotes and custom logic models I'd built myself. But under Document Author, it read, "Ethan Collins, Director of Strategic Ops." Not my name, not even my department. And suddenly, I knew. This wasn't a toast. It was a handoff. The champagne hadn't been for me. The leftover confetti was still stuck to the hallway carpet when I got the calendar ping. Meeting with Craig and Lorraine, Conference Room B, 8:40 a.m. No subject line, no context. Just the kind of ominous vagueness that smells like something rotten. I walked in 3 minutes early. Craig was already seated, hands clasped, eyes blank. Lorraine from HR sat beside him with a legal pad and the kind of corporate smile that meant something was about to be taken away. Craig didn't bother asking how I was. "We've been evaluating team structure across departments," he started, voice flat. "And we've decided it's time for a realignment. You'll be moving into a new role, technical liaison support, effective immediately." I blinked once. "I'm sorry?" Lorraine jumped in. "It's not a demotion, just a lateral shift. Helena, you'll still be involved in technical execution, but we're phasing out redundant management layers." Redundant? I'd led the single biggest proposal in company history, and overnight. I was now an extra. I held my tongue. Barely. Craig leaned forward, elbows on the table like he was doing me a favor. "This isn't about your performance. We're just headed in a more streamlined direction. Less hierarchy, more action." I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and ask who exactly had built the system Greenwell loved. Instead, I just nodded slowly. "Got it." Lorraine smiled like I'd passed a test. "We'll have a revised job description for you by end of day." I walked out without another word. My badge still worked, but my access was limited. My office had already been reassigned. A cardboard box sat on my new desk, an old cubicle near the back, holding my mug, my mousepad, and a folded-up sticky note with my name scrawled in marker. The final insult came when I checked the meeting invite, sent, Tuesday, 4:06 p.m. The champagne toast? That had been Wednesday night. He'd scheduled my demotion nearly 24 hours before praising me in front of the entire company. That raise he whispered about? It was never real, just a distraction, a mask. I sat in silence, jaw tight, rage curling in my chest like smoke that refused to rise. They expected me to disappear, to feel small, to say thank you and move on. But I wasn't done, not even close. The silence was louder than any applause I'd ever heard. When I returned to my old team's floor to collect the rest of my things, not a single person made eye contact. A few glanced up from their monitors, then immediately looked back down, pretending to type, pretending not to see me. A week ago, they'd stayed late with me to prepare slide decks and refine the demo for Greenwell. I'd bought them pizza. We'd laughed about formatting mishaps. I remember Brian from finance spilling Diet Coke on his keyboard and saying, "We're all going to remember this night." Apparently, no one remembered anything now. My corner office had already been stripped, photos gone, whiteboard wiped, my team's Slack channel had been archived. Even the welcome mat outside the door was gone. I shoved my last 2 folders into a messenger bag and turned to leave. That's when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. It was Kara, my former data analyst, early 30s. Bright, ambitious, and sharp enough to know when something smelled off. She looked at me cautiously, then handed me a Post-it. "You didn't hear it from me," she murmured, and walked away. On the note was a single phrase. "Check Craig's LinkedIn." I found an empty bench near the break room and opened the app. There it was. Posted that morning. Timestamped at 10:15 a.m. Proud to share the final strategic proposal for Greenwell Logistics, built by our exceptional leadership team. Special credit to Ethan Collins, our Director of Strategic Ops, who spearheaded the architecture behind the solution. True innovation is never a solo act, but some leaders shine brightest under pressure. Ethan Collins, the man who once asked me what an API endpoint was. The same man I had to correct last month for confusing integration testing with regression testing. My jaw clenched as I scrolled down to the image. It was the final diagram I had drawn. My layout, my annotations, my framework. But the watermark had been replaced with Rydel's logo, and Ethan's name was tagged in bold. Not a single mention of me, not even a thank you buried in the hashtags. I wasn't just being erased, I was being rewritten. I stared at the screen. Bitterness thick in my throat. For a moment, I felt something in me fold, like a bridge I'd spent years building had been set on fire while I was still standing on it. I closed the app, let them have their story. I was already writing a new one, and this time, it would have my name on every page. There's a certain clarity that comes when the chaos stops making noise. After the post, after the whispers, after the silent exits of people I used to lead, I sat alone in my car outside the Rydell parking structure. Engine off. Windows cracked just slightly to let the autumn air inside. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just stared ahead and thought, I'd been erased from the picture, so maybe it was time to build a new frame. 3 months earlier, long before the Greenwell deal heated up, I'd taken a quiet weekend trip to Oregon. To everyone else, it looked like a getaway, a break. But what I actually did that weekend was file paperwork, register a domain, and open a secure bank account, Viridian North, LLC, consulting, technology solutions, and proprietary infrastructure modeling, all of it mine. No, it wasn't against company policy. I never used Rydell resources. Every model I stored under Viridian was built in my off hours, based on publicly available frameworks or ideas I'd refined before I joined. I was careful, precise. I knew one day I'd need to protect what I'd built with my own hands, and that day had arrived faster than I'd expected. I logged into the Viridian portal on my laptop. It was all still there: architecture plans, deployment maps, even the cleaned-up version of the Greenwell system I developed before the Rydell team ever got involved. I started to refine the pitch deck, not because I was angry, because I was ready. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from a name I hadn't seen in years. Jillian Madsen. She and I had worked together at a startup a decade ago. Brilliant strategist, kind eyes. She'd left corporate chaos to take a quieter role. Last I heard. She'd joined Greenwell Logistics as a board consultant. Her message was short, but it made me sit straighter. Just heard some chatter. Sounds like Rydell's replacing the full technical team for the rollout. No prior notice. Something feels wrong. My fingers paused over the keyboard. Of course, Craig wasn't just erasing me. He was wiping out the whole team I'd led. Probably to install his own people. Probably to consolidate credit. Probably to cut costs. I typed a reply. Thanks for the heads up. Might be time I reached out. Not as Helena from Rydell, but from somewhere else. The name Viridian North had never meant anything to anyone. Until now. It was time to introduce them to the name no one knew. I parked in the far corner of the east lot, where no one from executive leadership ever bothered to walk, and shut off the engine. For a while, I just sat there. The only sound coming from the faint ticking of the cooling engine and the occasional wind brushing through the trees that lined the faded concrete. It was the same spot where I'd parked the night I stayed late to finish the Greenwell blueprint. I remembered rushing to beat the security system's autolock at 11:59 p.m., clutching a flash drive in one hand and a leftover granola bar in the other. Back then, I believed in something bigger than the title. I believed hard work would outshine politics. That belief was breaking now, piece by piece, and I could feel it. My laptop was still in the passenger seat, unopened. I didn't want to work. I didn't want to strategize. I just wanted to hear a voice that reminded me why I ever cared. So I opened my voice recorder app and played back a clip I'd saved from 4 months ago during one of our internal planning calls. Let's prioritize modular efficiency. My voice echoed through the car. Greenwell won't just want speed. They'll want scalable stability in 3 quarters or less. We build for growth, not just launch. I sounded focused, calm, sure of myself. The voice of a woman who still thought she was being heard. I clicked another one. Make sure the legal review includes Clause 9b. If we miss that, we're liable for their security layers. No exceptions. And another. Don't wait for them to ask. Let's bring them the solution they didn't know they needed. By the 4th playback, my hand was shaking. Not with rage, not with defiance, with something closer to exhaustion. Tears welled up without warning, not loud, just the kind that sting behind your eyes when you finally realize you've given everything to a place that never intended to give anything back. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel. My blazer wrinkled, my eyes burned. I felt small in a way I hadn't since my first week out of grad school. Was I foolish for believing excellence mattered? Was I naive to think results could ever protect you from politics? I needed air. I sat up, wiped my eyes, and finally opened my laptop. If I couldn't change the past, I could at least face it. I opened the company calendar system, curious to see who was listed for the upcoming contract meeting with Greenwell. The date was set for 10 a.m. next Tuesday. Clicking into the event, my heart rate picked up. Attendees, Craig Montgomery, Ethan Collins, 2 junior project analysts. No mention of me, not even as a technical observer. I read it twice, then 3 times, just to be sure. He had replaced me with people who hadn't even been on the initial build. Craig hadn't just cut me out. He was trying to erase my fingerprints entirely, before the ink had even dried. I closed the laptop slowly, hands steadier now than before. The breakdown had already happened. What followed would be something else entirely. The tears had dried. The voice recordings were tucked back into the archive. The ache in my chest hadn't left, but something else had taken its place. Resolve? Not the loud, cinematic kind that breaks things, the quiet kind, the kind that rebuilds. I drove home in silence that night. No music, no calls, just me and the rhythm of the city lights passing through the windshield. When I got home, I made tea, opened my laptop, and logged into Viridian North's secure workspace. It was time. No more waiting. No more pretending I didn't see what was happening. Craig had made his move. Now. I would make mine. I opened the Greenwell folder and reviewed the draft proposal I'd refined weeks earlier. Before the champagne. Before the betrayal. Before the breakdown. It was leaner than the one Craig's team had submitted. Modular, scalable, built to reduce onboarding by 20% and cut maintenance overhead in half. But it wasn't just better. It was mine. Every diagram, every metric, every predictive outcome, generated on my weekends, stored on my own cloud, under a company I legally owned. I'd triple-checked the compliance. I'd registered the trademarks. I had full IP control. And I knew it. Still. This wasn't just about being right. It was about being deliberate. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition. On my terms. I found Gillian Madson's contact card and stared at it for a long moment. She'd sent me that message last week about hearing chatter at Greenwell. That wasn't nothing. Gillian didn't traffic in gossip. She trafficked in risk mitigation. She had been my mentor once, during my early 20s, at a startup called HexSpan. She taught me the value of clarity in every pitch and the danger of promising what you couldn't deliver. I trusted her. Even now. I opened a blank email. Subject line: Alternative Proposal, Strategic Tech Architecture. No branding, no ego, just the facts. Gillian. I've been following the Greenwell rollout closely and noticed some shifts in the implementation team. As a professional courtesy, I'm submitting an alternative framework for your consideration. Developed independently through Viridian North. All materials are original, legally retained, and optimized for scale, risk control, and post-launch transition. Attached, proposal summary, timeline, technical appendices, and licensing terms. Best regards. Helena Ward, Principal Consultant, Viridian North. LLC. I stared at the send button for 5 seconds, then clicked. No fanfare, no fireworks, just one decisive move. 10 hours later. At 7:45 a.m. My phone buzzed. A reply. Thank you, Helena. This is interesting. If everything in your deck checks out, we may need to reevaluate our current direction. Stay close. No promises. But in Gillian's world, stay close wasn't casual. I leaned back in my chair. The city outside my window was waking up. People were rushing to offices where their names might still matter. Mine had been buried. But now, it was rising again. Quietly, under a different name. By 9:30 a.m., Craig's post was already making the rounds. I didn't follow him on LinkedIn, but Kara sent me the screenshot anyway. She added no message. She didn't need to. Excited to announce our upcoming contract finalization with Greenwell Logistics next week. This partnership reflects months of strategic planning by our exceptional leadership team. Big thanks to Ethan Collins for owning this from start to finish. Let's keep pushing boundaries. My name wasn't mentioned. Again. The same man who just months ago raised a glass to me in front of our entire team now wrote as if I had never existed. He'd crafted the illusion well, complete with a polished stock photo of a handshake in front of abstract city lights. 183 likes. 47 comments. All from people who had no idea who actually wrote the architecture behind the deal. I didn't reply. I didn't comment. I didn't even allow myself to reread it. Instead, I watched. People underestimate how powerful silence can be, especially when they think it means surrender. Inside Rydell, the air was buzzing. I wasn't there, but I could feel it. Kara confirmed it during our coffee meetup that evening. They think you quit, she whispered across the table. Like, cracked under pressure or something. There's a rumor HR offered you a lesser role to help you adjust. Someone even said you were burned out from the workload. I blinked slowly. Who started it? She hesitated. Could have been Craig. Could have been Lorraine. Doesn't matter. Really. The narrative is out there now, and people are buying it. A lesser version of me might have tried to defend myself, post some cryptic message, clarify the facts, but I wasn't that woman anymore. They could have the whispers. I had the proof. The next morning, I received an anonymous email, no subject, just a voice memo attachment. I played it. Static crackled at first, then Craig's voice, clear, confident, careless. Helena's not part of this anymore. She had her moment, but it's done. This contract doesn't need her name on it. There was a pause. The kind people make when they think they're in control. By next week, this thing is signed, and she'll be a footnote. I sat back, letting the words settle like ash. He wasn't just deleting me. He was rewriting history in real time, and he believed it would stick. What Craig didn't know, what no one in that office had figured out yet, was that Viridian North was no longer just a shell. It was ready. The proposal had been reviewed. The numbers ran clean, and Jillian had already scheduled a call with Greenwell's board. I didn't need to explain myself to Craig. The last chapter wasn't going to be written on LinkedIn. It was going to be signed, on paper, in ink, under my name. The building wasn't unfamiliar, but it had never felt like this before. I'd been to Greenwell's corporate offices half a dozen times in the past year, usually shadowing someone from the executive team. Sometimes I presented, most of the time. I supported. I was the quiet expert with all the answers, but none of the spotlight. But today, I didn't carry anyone's bag. I didn't enter as a subordinate. Today, I walked in wearing a navy suit I had tailored 2 months earlier, before I ever knew I'd need it. Crisp lapels, dark heels, hair pulled tight. Not because I wanted to impress, but because I wanted to feel armor around my spine. The security guard at the front desk nodded politely. "Name?" he asked, fingers hovering over the digital check-in tablet. I didn't hesitate. "Helena Ward, Principal Consultant, Viridian North." He scanned the list, then smiled faintly. "You're already on the schedule. Conference room 5A, upstairs. They're expecting you." As I stepped into the elevator, I took one slow breath. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. There was no adrenaline rush, just focus, pure, calculated focus. Craig would arrive soon. He wouldn't expect me here. Not like this. And certainly not with my name on the door. The elevator opened to a sunlit hallway lined with glass offices. The walls were etched with the Greenwell logo, clean serif lettering against frosted panels. I followed the signage toward 5A, each step echoing a rhythm I'd heard only once before, right before my grad school thesis defense, when everything came down to one room and one name, at the entrance to the boardroom. I stopped short, on the sleek whiteboard outside the glass door. Someone had written the meeting lineup in green marker. Craig Montgomery, Riddell Innovations. CEO, Helena Ward, Viridian North. Principal Consultant. 2 names, 2 companies, 2 fates. No Ethan Collins. No Lorraine from HR. Just the man who tried to erase me, and the woman he underestimated. Inside the room, a Greenwell executive I recognized, Miriam Santos, was reviewing a binder with a neutral expression. She glanced up and smiled when she saw me. Not surprised, not confused. "Helena," she said. "Welcome back." Back. I nodded and stepped in, the soles of my shoes meeting polished floor like it belonged to me. I laid my portfolio on the table, not overflowing with pages, just a single printed copy of the revised proposal. Miriam gestured to the head of the table. "You're leading today." Not presenting, not supporting, leading. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed, a message from Kara. "He just walked into the office. He's dressed like it's Oscar night. I think he brought champagne." Of course he did. Craig thought this was a victory lap. He had no idea the finish line had already moved, and he wasn't invited. A second message followed, this one from Jillian. Let's keep things clean. No drama. But don't hold back either. If they ask who wrote the backbone of the system, tell them the truth. The truth was simple. It had always been simple. I built it. I scaled it. I protected it. He tried to steal it. And now, I would sign it, under my name, under my terms, without apology. As the clock ticked toward 10 o'clock a.m., I leaned back in my seat and waited. Let him walk in. Let him see. The door opened at 10 o'clock a.m. sharp. Craig stepped in like he owned the oxygen. Crisp charcoal suit, navy tie, wristwatch he only wore during media shoots. His assistant trailed behind him, struggling to keep up with a silver briefcase, 2 branded folders, and what looked suspiciously like a pre-written press release. His eyes scanned the room with the confidence of a man expecting applause. Then he saw me, and for the first time since this all began, he froze. The expression was fleeting. 2 seconds of visible confusion before his default arrogance kicked back in. He smiled like he'd walked into the wrong room, then corrected course mid-step. "Helena," he said slowly, "didn't expect to see you here?" I didn't stand. I didn't even blink. "Good morning, Craig," I replied evenly. "Have a seat. We've already begun the preliminary review." He looked at Miriam, who nodded toward the chair opposite me. The tension in the room shifted, just slightly. Craig hesitated, then sat, still holding his folder like a shield. "Let's get started," Miriam said. The next 30 minutes passed in controlled tempo. Jillian joined the meeting virtually, her voice steady as she walked through the evaluation matrix: cost to implementation ratio, timeline efficiency, licensing clarity, post-launch support scalability, every metric tilted toward Viridian North. Craig's folder remained unopened. At one point, he tried to interrupt. "If I may, Rydell's legacy systems." Jillian cut him off. "We've assessed Rydell's systems. We've also assessed who actually built them." She let the words hang in the air, just long enough to make it uncomfortable. Miriam turned the final page. "All right. We've reached our decision." I didn't need to look up. I could feel it. "For this phase of the contract," she said, "Greenwell Logistics will be proceeding with Viridian North." Craig stiffened, color draining slowly from his face. "This is a mistake," he murmured. "You're gambling on a one-person shell company." I finally looked at him. "Not a shell, a solution. One your own team couldn't replicate without pulling from materials they never owned." He opened his mouth, but Jillian spoke first. "We've already validated the legal structure. Helena holds exclusive IP ownership for the system in question. It was never assigned to Rydell under any employment clause. We've verified timestamps, architecture records, and hosting chains. It's clean." Miriam reached for the pen. On the top page of the agreement, my name was printed in clean font: Helena Ward, Principal Consultant, Viridian North. Beneath that, in fine print, the line I'd written myself when I first registered the company: all core systems designed under exclusive Viridian IP. Helena Ward, 100% retained rights. She signed, then passed the pen to me. I took it without hesitation, and I signed. Craig didn't move. His fingers tapped the arm of his chair rhythmically, like he was trying to summon some clever rebuttal. But the words wouldn't come. He'd built his whole presentation on a structure I no longer stood under. He wasn't just losing a contract. He was watching his narrative collapse in front of an audience that no longer believed him. And I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I didn't say a word, because the signature spoke louder than anything I could have said. When the papers were gathered and the final hands were shaken, I stood, gathered my materials, and nodded to Miriam. "Thank you for the opportunity." Outside the boardroom, the hallway felt warmer, not because of the lighting, but because I had walked in with nothing but my name, and walked out with everything they tried to take. The morning after the contract was signed, the air in my apartment felt different. Lighter, quieter, not in the empty sense, but in that rare, sacred kind of quiet that only follows closure. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pop champagne or book a vacation. I made tea, turned off notifications, and watched the sunrise without checking email. By 10:30 a.m., Craig's resignation was trending on a few tech business blogs. Leadership shift? Vision misalignment? Internal transition? They dressed it up in euphemisms. But those of us who'd been in the room knew the truth. He lost everything the moment he tried to steal what didn't belong to him. Rydell Innovations spent the next quarter scrambling. Investors pulled back. Clients started asking for independent audits. One by one, the cracks widened until even employees who had stayed loyal couldn't defend the silence. Some jumped ship, others stayed, hoping for a pivot that never came. And me? I stayed silent. No exposé, no tell-all, no social media statement. Not because I was scared, because I was free. Viridian North didn't launch with a bang. It expanded like a quiet wave. One client recommended another. Our metrics spoke for themselves. I started turning away work just to preserve the quality I promised in every proposal. I built a small team, not an empire. Just the right people who valued integrity over hierarchy. One of them was Kara. She left Rydell 6 months after I did. Said she was tired of pretending excellence didn't matter. I didn't ask for details. I just gave her space to be heard. And then came the call. Jillian's voice was calm as ever. Greenwell wants to scale. Full integration. 5 continents. They want Viridian to lead all of it. The number? $60 million. No bidding war. No corporate theater. Just trust built on clarity. Delivered in silence. A year ago. I was demoted in a closed-door meeting and told I no longer fit the vision. Now, I walk into rooms where I write the vision. Craig's name hasn't been spoken in a long time. People forget fast when your legacy was built on borrowed brilliance. But mine? It grew quietly, consistently, under my name, on my terms. And that's what freedom tastes like. Not loud, not flashy, just honest, full, real. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, staying true, and letting your work speak when others go quiet. If you've ever been silenced, sidelined, or underestimated, remember this. You don't have to scream to be heard. You just have to keep building. If Helena's story spoke to something inside you, like the video, subscribe to the channel and tell me, what's the quietest but boldest choice you've ever made? Let's keep building on our terms.